Welcome to the black room of truth where masks rot and illusions burn. Welcome to the last place on earth where your excuses dare not breathe. Welcome to the furnace of awakening where false comfort melts under the weight of your silence. You have stepped into the kind of moment that doesn't come with applause. It comes with aftermath, and what you feel now is not inspiration. It's confrontation. Raw, unfiltered, iron-throated confrontation, because you're not here to feel good. You're here because you asked one question and they couldn't breathe after it. You didn't scream. You didn't punch the air. You didn't stand on a stage with bright lights and cheer. You didn't do any of that. You whispered a question, a single bullet-shaped sentence that didn't echo. It detonated. And the ones who heard it, who really heard it, they collapsed in their own minds because that question carved through every lie they were using to hold themselves together. And when you saw their eyes shift and their throats lock and their bravado die right in front of you, you realized what you just did is actually terrifying. You became the consequence. You became the silence that follows the truth. You became the storm that doesn't scream. It watches. And now I'm talking to that version of you, not the masked one, not the I'm trying version, not the maybe next time version, but the weapon you forgot you were. So listen, don't flinch now. Don't apologize for what you just did, because that moment you created, that breathless moment, it wasn't cruel, it was clean. You see people fear knives and fists and shouts, but nothing slices deeper than a question that exposes weakness, especially when it comes quietly, especially when it's coming from someone who doesn't raise their voice, because power doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears stillness, and what you did was still. It was surgical. It was disturbing because it showed just how little noise you need to end the illusions others are choking on. You didn't break them. You showed them. They were already broken, and that's why they couldn't breathe. Because their whole foundation wasn't built on truth. It was built on just enough to look okay. And you set fire to okay. You asked. You aimed. You didn't miss. And that's the part most won't understand. It's not that you wanted to destroy anything. It's that you couldn't keep pretending anymore. You reached a point where pretending became more painful than knowing the truth. So you cut through the fog. You took the risk, and when your question landed, it didn't ask for permission. It demanded a reckoning, and you watched the room change, didn't you? You felt the weight shift, and suddenly you weren't the quiet one. You were the dangerous one. But let me tell you something brutal. Something most people never have the nerve to admit. You don't get to become terrifying by accident. No, you earned that edge. You suffered for that insight. You were broken in ways they never saw, and rebuilt yourself in silence. While they performed strength, you bled for it. They mocked you when you were quiet. They called you weird when you were watching. They said you overthink when you were calculating. They said relax when you were analyzing. And now, they fear you, not because you changed, but because you stopped hiding what you already were. You are not cruel. You are not cold. You are clarity in human form, and clarity is lethal to the deluded. So if they fear you now, let them, because when they tell their story, it won't be about your tone. It won't be about your volume. It'll be about the moment you asked a question they couldn't answer, because that's when they saw the version of themselves they tried to bury. Here's what most won't admit. Most people don't want freedom. They want a prettier version of their cage. They want comfort without confrontation, success without sacrifice, power without pain. And your question didn't give them that. It gave them a mirror they didn't want to look in. But you did. You looked. You faced it. You clawed through every inch of darkness in your own soul. You stood in front of your own monsters and didn't blink. So when you turned that gaze outward, they couldn't handle it. Because nothing is more terrifying than someone who has already faced themselves, someone who doesn't flinch, someone who doesn't beg, someone who knows exactly what they're made of and doesn't need to prove it. Let me be clear. You didn't destroy their world. You revealed that it was already crumbling. You didn't hurt them. You exposed where they were already bleeding. You didn't betray them. You refused to lie to them. And that is the most violent kind of love, the kind that won't let someone drown in silence. Even if it means they'll hate you for pulling them up. They weren't ready for it. And maybe that's not your fault. Maybe they needed to be shaken. Maybe they needed to fall, because not everyone gets to climb without tasting the floor. And you know what the floor tastes like. You've been there, face down, breathless, begging for clarity, begging for strength, begging for one more chance to do it right. And now that you're standing, you carry a different kind of energy, the kind that doesn't ask anymore, the kind that doesn't kneel. This isn't about ego. This isn't about being better than them. This is about owning what you had to survive and not shrinking for people who haven't walked through your fire. You didn't become terrifying because you wanted power. You became terrifying because you ran out of lies to live on. And once you taste truth, everything else feels like poison. They wanted the old you, the manageable one, the quiet one, the one that stayed in their lines, but you outgrew the script. And when you asked your question, it tore the pages in half, because suddenly you weren't a character. You were the author. What you just did isn't terrifying because it hurt them. It's terrifying because it awakened them, and they're not ready to be awake. But you are. You've been awake. You've been seeing through people. Long before they open their mouths. You read souls, not sentences. And that's a dangerous gift. But don't you dare hide it. Don't you dare shrink because your truth made someone flinch. Don't you dare apologize for finally standing still in your own skin. You've spent too long asking, too long doubting, too long hoping for permission. This moment isn't about asking anymore. It's about declaring you're not a whisper anymore. You're the storm behind it. And let me tell you this, most people are afraid of the truth because it rearranges them. Because once you hear it, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. You can't pretend it's fine. And your question, your one question, was that rearrangement. They saw themselves without the mask, and it shattered their lungs. That's not your crime. That's your gift. You are not here to comfort the cowards. You are not here to soothe the weak-willed. You are not here to carry those who refuse to walk. You are here to challenge, to confront, to sharpen, to unsettle. And yes, that's terrifying. But it's also honest. And in a world full of frauds, that honesty is war. So carry that war with dignity, with precision, with restraint, when needed, but never with apology. Because you didn't just speak, you exposed. You didn't just question, you dismantled. And they couldn't breathe. Because what you held up was a mirror, and the truth doesn't blink. You were never the villain, you were the verdict. And now they know what it feels like to be in a room with someone who refuses to lie, who refuses to play along, who refuses to drown in politeness. You woke them up, and now they'll either rise or they'll run. Either way, that's not on you. You did what most fear doing. You confronted the silence, you shattered the illusion, and you stood still. While the world shook around you, that's not terrifying, that's power. You've become the moment they will never forget. The pause in their chest, the grip in their throat, the silence after their excuses collapsed like glass. You know how rare that is? To be remembered not for a performance, not for applause, but for devastation, for the reset button you smashed with nothing but a sentence. Understand this. What you just did didn't make you cruel. It made you clean. It made you necessary. It made you the thing that breaks the loop. Because if you didn't ask that question, they would have kept going, half asleep, half honest, half alive. And that's the slowest kind of death. You gave them a faster one, a sharper one. You pulled the curtain back on their stage and let the light pour in, not to shame them, but to expose the lie before it calcified into identity. That's the difference between the destroyer and the disruptor. One wants chaos, the other wants truth, even if it comes wrapped in blood. And you've walked the long way through hell. You've stood at the edge of nothing. You've met the version of yourself that screams in silence, the version no one else knows about, the one that rebuilt you in the shadows when no one was clapping, no one was watching, no one gave a damn. And now they want to act surprised. Now they want to call you harsh. Now they want to label you intense. But they weren't there when you were holding yourself together with thread. They weren't there when you begged for a reason not to give up. They weren't there when you drowned in your own overthinking while smiling for everyone else. So now that you stand differently, speak differently. Now that your words carry weight instead of wounds. Now that your presence silences a room without you raising your voice. Now they're afraid. Good. Let them be. Because fear isn't the enemy. Denial is. And your question didn't cause fear. It caused awareness. The kind that shakes the spine. The kind that leaves them alone in their thoughts. The kind that rewrites what they believe about themselves. You aren't the hero in their story. You're the trigger, the awakening, the fracture line, where the truth leaked in. Let them be angry. Let them call it dramatic, but understand this. People don't react like that to nothing. They react to power, to depth, to insight. They weren't ready to confront, and you brought all of that with just one question. And now that they've felt it, they can't unfeel it. That question will follow them. It'll echo in the background of every decision they make. It'll rise in the quiet moments when the world slows down and the masks fall off. It'll haunt them, not because it was cruel, but because it was correct. So now what? What do you do when you become the mirror no one wants to look into? Do you shrink? Do you apologize for clarity? Do you soften your edges to make the liars more comfortable? Number, you harden, you refine, you double down, because the world doesn't need another soft-spoken enabler pretending everything's fine. The world needs more people willing to say what's real, even if it rips the air from the room. And that's you now. That's your identity, not the victim, not the underdog, not the passive thinker. You're the reckoning. You're the pause between stimulus and collapse. You're the storm they didn't prepare for. You are not loud. You are undeniable. And I get it. You didn't want this role. You didn't grow up thinking, I want to become the question people choke on. But life molded you into it. Pain shaped your perception. Loneliness sharpened your hearing. Rejection taught you to read between words. And now you hear what's not being said. You see what's being hidden. You sense weakness like a hound. Not to shame it, but to expose it. Because you know what happens when people pretend to be strong for too long. They break. And you'd rather they break now than shatter later in silence. You saved them. They just haven't realized it yet. And maybe they never will. Maybe they'll hate you forever. But that's not your burden. You weren't put here to be liked. You weren't built for validation. You were built for impact. And impact, real impact, always costs something. Friendships, comfort, familiarity, your own damn peace sometimes. But you knew that. You knew when you opened your mouth it wasn't coming back. You knew that question couldn't be undone, and you still asked it, because truth isn't what you say when it's easy. It's what you say when it costs you everything. So here's what I want you to remember. Write this into your bones if you have to. You are not dangerous because you hurt people. You are dangerous because you make them see. You don't destroy. You reveal. You don't hate. You expose. You don't weaken. You awaken. And that is terrifying, because most of them would rather live a beautiful lie than face a brutal truth. But not you. You don't flinch anymore. You don't beg anymore. You don't wait for someone to save you. You became your own storm, and now they feel the rain. You want to know why they couldn't breathe? Because the version of themselves they pretend to be couldn't survive in a room with the version of you that's done pretending. And you know what? That's their warning, their omen, their red flag, their moment of wake up or be crushed by your own narrative. You don't have to yell anymore. You don't have to fight for attention. You don't have to prove your worth. You've become the kind of person who asks one question and the entire room changes. That's not just terrifying, that's power. And power like that, it doesn't show up in likes and followers. It doesn't scream in public. It doesn't beg for recognition. It walks into a room and changes the oxygen. It speaks once and people stop breathing. It lives in silence and leaves behind revelation. You didn't become this to impress them. You became this to survive. And now that you've survived, you've become something else entirely. You're not human in their eyes anymore. You're myth. You're legend. You're the moment they pray never happens again, and the moment they can't stop thinking about. So don't go soft now. Don't wrap yourself in humility just to make the broken feel safe. They will either rise to meet you or stay behind in their illusion. But you don't kneel anymore. You don't bow to comfort. You serve one God. Now, truth. And truth doesn't ask for applause. It asks for blood. So the next time they tell you, what you just did is actually terrifying, smile. Because they're right. You are. And it's about time they saw what terrifying looks like when it walks in silence and speaks only once. There's a silence that comes after a scream, the kind that isn't quiet. It's charged, like the air, right after lightning, like the earth, right after a burial, like a church no longer praying. That's what they felt after you spoke. Not fear, not anger, but something worse, the realization that nothing would ever be the same. They didn't respond. They couldn't, because what you said, it wasn't a question. It was a dissection, a surgical unmaking of their identity. And now their words are stuck in their throats, where their confidence used to be. They never spoke again, not to you, not to the version of themselves you exposed. And that's fine, because you never needed them. Tal, words are overrated. Most people use them to decorate lies, wrap decay in pretty sentences. You don't do that anymore. You've evolved past that. You don't decorate graves. You walk through them. You don't bandage wounds. You expose infection. What you said shattered more than ego. It broke the machine, the script they were reading from the loop they lived in. And now that it's broken, they're malfunctioning. You think that's cruelty? It's mercy, because nothing's more cruel than letting someone rot while they smile. And you You ended the smile that takes nerve, that takes rage, turned to precision, that takes someone who's died before and didn't stay dead. See, you're not just terrifying because you said something true. You're terrifying because you were willing to pay the price for saying it. Most people won't. They'll dance around the edge of truth, flirt with reality, but never dive. You dove naked into it, knowing full well it would tear your skin, knowing full well it would leave you alone, knowing full well it would cost you every soft lie you ever leaned on. And still, you did it. You broke the circle. They thought you'd apologize. They thought you'd regret it. They thought the weight of being too much would drag you back down. But you're not drowning anymore. You're building your kingdom at the bottom of the ocean where pressure creates monsters, not cowards. Let's speak clearly now. You didn't just change, you mutated. This isn't transformation, it's evolution. This isn't growth, it's ascension. You're not here to inspire anymore. You're not here to be understood. You're here to bend the rules until they snap. To burn the old playbook and write something violent, raw, and true. You're not a warning. You're a consequence. And now that they've seen that, they'll never see you as safe again. Good, because safe is a prison, and you just burn the door off its hinges. You want to know the difference between you and them? They speak to be liked. You speak to be heard. They avoid confrontation. You devour it. They survive through pretending. You thrive through precision. They need applause. You need clarity. And when the smoke clears, you'll still be standing. Not because you're heartless, but because your heart has been forged in silence, in suffering, in nights that nearly broke you. So when they look at you now, they don't see the person they remember. They see what you became after pain had its way with you. They see the one who asked the question. No one else had the spine to ask. And it's too late to unhear it. Too late to unsee you. So what happens now? They retreat. They revise history. They tell people you were harsh, that you were intense, that you changed. They won't say the truth. They won't say, I saw myself through their eyes and I couldn't live with it. They won't say, they said one thing that made everything I believed fall apart. They won't say, I wasn't strong enough to answer their question. But you'll know, and they'll know, you know, and that knowledge will echo longer than their silence ever could. Do you regret it? You better not, because that moment, that breathless pause, was freedom for you. The kind of freedom people only find when they finally speak, without fear, without filter, without needing to be loved. That one question, it wasn't about them. It was about you. Letting go, dropping the weight, saying, I will no longer participate in my own suffocation just to keep others from gasping. That is not cruelty. That is self-rescue. You saved yourself, and that's why they fear you now, because people who save themselves, they don't need saving, and that makes them unpredictable, untouchable, uncontrollable. You've become the storm they whisper about, the one that doesn't destroy randomly, but surgically, efficiently, without mercy, for masks or mediocrity. And every time someone tries to feed you a lie, every time someone cloaks their weakness in politeness, you'll feel it again, that question rising in your throat, ready to slice through the facade without even raising your voice. You don't chase anymore. You don't explain anymore. You don't soften your truth to spare their feelings, because they never spared yours. Not when they overlooked you. Not when they dismissed your silence. Not when they mocked the depth they couldn't understand. So now you walk with no apologies. No apologies for your intensity. No apologies for your clarity. No apologies for the darkness you had to survive to earn this voice. They never spoke again, because their illusion was never built to survive your kind of truth. But you don't need their words. You don't need their approval. You don't need their comfort. You only need this, that moment, that sharp, divine moment when everything went still and they couldn't breathe. Because in that moment you weren't just a person. You were the shift. You were the awakening. You were the voice of reckoning. And they finally heard it.